It was a military proclamation. Lincoln is issuing the Emancipation Proclamation in his constitutional capacity as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. It is a war powers proclamation because it is presumed in the Constitution. It's not specifically spelled out, but it's presumed that when the Constitution designates the president as commander-in-chief, it also clothes him with certain war powers. That phrase, war powers, is not actually in the Constitution, but the assumption has been that if you're going to be the commander-in-chief, there are certain war powers that pertain to that role. It was as a war powers proclamation that Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation. It is as a war powers proclamation that the Emancipation Proclamation declares free all the slaves then in Confederate-controlled territory in the South. Now, it's important to notice what the proclamation doesn't do fully as much as what it does. The Emancipation Proclamation, strictly speaking, does not free all the slaves. It frees the slaves in Confederate-held territory, which looks a little strange. That made the London Times make the comment that in those places where Lincoln does have uncontested authority, places like the border states, Kentucky, Maryland, Missouri, and Delaware, he doesn't free anybody. But in the places where he doesn't have any authority, or at least not the muscle to back it up, there he declares people free. And the London Times thought that was terribly funny. And no one else did, because it was very clearly understood that as commander-in-chief, issuing a war powers proclamation, he could only issue that proclamation to cover those areas which were in rebellion, which were at war. If you're going to issue a war powers proclamation, it has to be done in the context of actual belligerency. He did not have constitutional authority to change the status of slavery in the border states, or for that matter, in any of those parts of the Confederacy which had been, up to that point, occupied by Union forces. They weren't at war with the United States. Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware, and Missouri had never tried to leave the Union. They'd always stayed in the Union, even though in those four states slavery was legal. However, it was legal as a matter of state enactment. As President of the United States, on the federal level, Lincoln did not have any authority to reach over the firewall that then existed between federal and state jurisdictions and free slaves in the border states. His authority as commander-in-chief, issuing a war powers proclamation, only ran as far as those areas which were actually in conflict with United States authority and United States forces. Now, that much said, that means that he freed 3.5 million slaves at one stroke, because all of those occupied areas of the Confederacy, still held by the Confederates, contained the bulk of the South's slaves.